All right, welcome everyone to the June 23rd, 2023 Calgary Metropolitan Region Board meeting. We do have a fairly big agenda today, so we'll try to move efficiently through it as best we can. First up will be Mayor Gondek with land acknowledgement.
All right. Okay. Oki Umbawastich Dada Nastada Tanse, everyone. Greetings to all of you in the mother languages of the Indigenous peoples who stewarded these lands for generations before we came to settle here, and to truly honor the people who protected this land over time, peoples that have treaty rights over these lands. Our promises towards truth and reconciliation have to come from the heart, and they need to reflect a commitment to do better. Together with many of you, I am on a journey to fully appreciate the truth about the land on which we have settled and moving towards a path that includes both reconciliation and action, to hear the stories that have been suppressed, the histories that were never told, and the voices that were silenced for far too long. And what does that mean in the work that we do here today and in our lives as municipal leaders? It means we have to be intentional in our process and our progress, because status quo is no longer going to cut it. The path forward is going to feel a lot different than the one that we're used to. And that's because we exist in a moment in time where we could be much better at being an inclusive and welcoming society. I really think we could do this if we actually looked at history and we looked at the principles and practices of Indigenous peoples, because those are rooted in acceptance, love for one another, being open to who an individual truly is. They are focused on believing that Creator brought us into this world to live with each other and in balance and harmony with nature. It's important to take these principles and practices to heart so we can move forward in a good way. We have to be bold in the legacy that we wish to build, and we need to be intentional not only to have good relations, but to be good relations. And let us recognize that we are on the ancestral lands of Treaty 7, which is comprised of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes Siksika, Piikani, Kainai First Nations, Ithaca, Stoney, Nakota Nations, which are comprised of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation. We also recognize that this is the home of Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and we acknowledge all urban Indigenous Southern Albertans who call this place home. Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Gondek, thank you. That was, as you've probably heard me say this many times before, but every time I travel around the region, I'm incredibly grateful for the amazing place that we live. We had the opportunity to visit Chestermere yesterday. We're here today. It's such a remarkable place. We really are very, very tremendously fortunate. And Mayor Gondek, thank you very much for that thoughtful land acknowledgement. Just a couple of very quick notices here before we get going. We all know we have a new minister, the same as a old minister. We've sent Minister McIver a letter of congratulations and reintroduction. The good news is he's very familiar with the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board. Our Government of Alberta representative, Sean Iwasak, is online and listening. The technology here that we have is he's unable to participate in the meeting in terms of responding, but he is listening in, and so the GOA rep is here. And as I noted, we have a fairly substantial agenda, so let's get going. We'll start with adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any additions, changes, amendments, or edits they wish to make to the agenda? And if not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Mayor Gondek. Councillor Foat, thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, anyone wishing to vote opposed to the adoption of the agenda? Hearing none, that carries. We'll go to Mayor Kissel from Rocky View County. Thank you very much for hosting us here today. Mayor Kissel is going to provide us with a presentation and an overview of what's happening here in beautiful Rocky View County. So Mayor Kissel, we'll go to you. Go ahead.
So good morning, everyone. This is my first opportunity to stand on this side of the podium. I like the perspective. So I'd like to welcome everybody here this morning, and my job today is to give you a virtual tour and to tell you a little bit about Rocky View. So I'm going to ask Ben to put up the slides, if we could. There we go, we have some help. So for those of you that don't know me, I am from Division 3, which is our west side. I had the, I guess, the fortunate, I got to reword that. I got lucky and got given right against the city with Watermark. And so I was a very rural type counselor who understood that. And so now that I've had my doors open and had a little bit more education about how we're growing, I want to share that with you because I found it very interesting. As much as I thought we were very diversified in my mind, when you actually go around Rocky View County, it looks a lot different when you're actually looking out of a window of a car. So if we could start with our first slide. So I'm going to give you just a little background information and then just a little virtual tour as we make our way around the county. So some general facts about the county are as follows. The county is comprised of approximately 950,000 acres of land. Approximately 90% of that land base is agriculturally zoned. Large swaths of population and economic development are located in an arc around the Calgary and major highways, and the outer regions are all focused mostly on agricultural. We have 43,000 residents who live in hamlets, acreages, farms, and ranches. We are the third largest population in the region after Calgary and Airdrie, and Langdon alone has a population of 5,200 people. The county is over 105 kilometers from the northwest corner to the southeast corner. We share 115 kilometers of border with the city of Calgary. Due to market pressure, both residential and non-residential development occurs close to the city of Calgary, while the outer parts of our county are primarily agricultural, except for Langdon and Bragg Creek. There are hamlets. So Rocky View shares borders with 13 municipalities, 2 First Nations, and we partner in 7 IDPs, 8 ICFs, and 6 IMCs. And we are part of the CMRB, so we are a very busy municipality. Slide 3. So, geography. That's one thing about Rocky View County is we are very diverse this way. The western portion of the county has relatively high elevation, and from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains and gradually descending as you get further east, there's approximately 500 meters of elevation change in our county. According to Stats Canada, there are 1,271 farms located in the county. The county's agriculture is predominantly cattle and pastures in the west, with some haying, and cropping on the east because of the higher qualities of soil. The western side of the county, the agriculture is primarily dictated to ranching and pasture and hay production. So your top picture shows the magnificent views our ranchers get to enjoy every day. And the bottom is just a lovely close-up of what you see when you head down the Grand Valley. You will see cattle. The eastern side of the county is relatively flat and dedicated to crop production. Access to the Western Irrigation District in the northeast and east portions of the county help to ensure agriculture productivity. Bragg Creek, our little hamlet on the west. Bragg Creek offers excellent recreation opportunities for the nature enthusiasts across the region. You can hike, bike, ski, and most of all, my favorite, I can take my horse and ride it in the mountains. To better protect the residents in the wake of the 2013 floods, the county partnered with the provincial and federal governments to flood mitigation infrastructure. This is a completed flood mitigation infrastructure. So if you saw the first slide, this kind of gives you a view of what our river looked like in Bright Creek. This is the work that's been done to protect this community, both businesses and residential. Then we're going to move over to Elbow Valley. Elbow Valley is on our south and just west of the city. Elbow Valley is a community to the west of Calgary that is a cluster-type development along the Highway 8 and has 40 acres of green space and 35 kilometers of trails that are maintained by the residents. So it suits a need of a demographic of a very special resident, one who wants a little more space, but yes, enjoys the outdoor and wants it on their doorstep. Springbank. Springbank is a community directly west of Calgary City, the city of Calgary. It is a community that is known to have larger parcels that allow residents to have horses. And as you head further west, the parcels become larger and then flow into our ranches. Bearspaw community is to the northwest of Calgary, and it sits very close in proximity to the border. They are predominantly 2-acre parcels for a very country-style living without cutting 4 acres of grass. So we also have Watermark, that is a higher density. If we stay on Bearspaw. So it shows you we have different asks for different areas, and we try to meet those asks. It is a higher density development built by McDonald Corp that offers city-style homes on larger lots with many amenities to those residents. Harmony. Harmony is near the airport, the Springbank Airport. It's just directly to the west. Harmony is a master plan community that is currently under construction with I'm not even going to say that word. They get a great view of the mountains. Picturesque. See, that one just wasn't coming out this morning. So they have mountain views and world-class amenities. Harmony currently has a golf course, a lake, a discovery center, and an adventure park. Future planned amenities include schools, more parks, and an extensive trail system. They are also looking forward to a business campus along with other commercial opportunities. Harmony provides an example of the evolution of rural planning. From a relatively dispersed patterns you saw Springbank and Bearspaw to a much denser development form that is supported by commercial, industrial, with private recreation and pathways. And we are handling the servicing much different as we densify. Springbank Airport. So this is just east of our Harmony development. It officially opened in 1971. The Springbank Airport was constructed to provide the Calgary International Airport with a reliever airport for the smaller aircrafts. Springbank Airport is based on a base of operations for many flight training schools and recreational flying organizations. This is the 6th largest airport in Canada by aircraft movement and contributes 1.3 or 5 million in direct and indirect GDP to the region. East Balzac. As the cities of Calgary and Airdrie expanded in the 90s and the early 2000s, the Balzac area began to attract business and industrial growth, primarily large warehouses that require significant parcels of land and a proximity to efficient transportation infrastructure. The area is a major employer for the region with an estimated 20,000 jobs. Now, that's a number from 2018, and I'm sure we'd see that number is much higher now. So we want to share some pictures. We all know Cross Iron Mall. We've all driven by it, I'm sure. Maybe we've even shopped in it. But we're not just about a mall. I wanted to share a picture of actually the size of the warehouses and how much actual construction is going on today. We continue to draw bigger businesses and we're always shocked as a council as to what comes to join Rocky View County. The CN Intermodal. The CN Intermodal Terminal is located in Conrich, which is east of Calgary and north of Chestermere. There are currently a few warehouses in the area, but we do anticipate that the presence of CN and the intermodal terminal will spur additional development in the area for logistics-type businesses who rely on rail transportation. Janet. So this is a conversation of the CMRB. That's quite current. So Janet is an industrial area that is limited services, it is an industrial hub located that is east of Calgary, but it's south of Chestermere, and it's in a very desirable area for businesses that need limited servicing, but they need larger tracts of land. So this is just another picture of Janet, just a little different view to see. And you can see the difference in the buildings only suit the need. So they're much smaller than we're seeing in Balzac. But what we're seeing is the use and the need for storage, the outdoor area space. So Langdon. Langdon is our largest hamlet. And in 1976, Langdon lost its village status and was amalgamated into Rocky View County. Today, Langdon is a bustling residential community of 5,193 people with schools, open spaces, local shops, businesses, and recreational uses such as golf and numerous parks. This is a resident section that you can see, and it has a weed lake in the background. So the Langdon Ball Diamonds were completed in 2020. The land was purchased in partnership with Rocky View Schools and local donations. The multi-million-dollar facility consisting of 4 diamonds were funded by the county. The purchase of this land is a joint use. And so this will be the home of the new Langdon High School, which will be opening in 2024. And the future home of our rec center for Langdon. So in the summer of 2021, we completed the Langdon Fire Hall. This houses the RCMP and county staff and supports the need of the east side of the county. So I want to thank you for your time. I hope this virtual tour has given you a little bit of a view of what we do and who we are. And we see ourselves as a community of communities and a regional partner. And thank you.
Mayor, thank you very much. That was an excellent and very informative presentation. I thought I knew a lot about Rocky View, and now I know a whole lot more. So thank you very much. I'll just open it up. If anyone has any questions or wishes to make any comments, any questions for Mayor Kissel? If not, Mayor, thank you. We'll let you get on with your day. Thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. All right, on to the consent agenda. Before we move the consent agenda, I just wanted to come to Jordan. There was an error, I think, in one of the documents. I think Jordan just wanted to speak to. So Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just on page 7 with respect to the additions to reserve framework. The way it's worded, it makes it sound like we're waiting for contributions from First Nations leadership, which is actually not true. We're just waiting for contribution from a member municipality. Okay. So we just wanted to make sure we were very clear on that.
Okay, and so we're going to amend that in the agenda package going forward. So with that amendment, just to be clear that we're not waiting on any of the nations, we're waiting on a member municipality for feedback, and that will be reflected in the package. So when we're voting on the consent agenda, just be aware that that's the change that would be made. Okay, and with that, does anyone wish to move either of the 2 items of the consent agenda, the minutes of the April 28th, 2023 board meeting, or the board strategic initiatives update for information, either of those items to the full agenda for debate? Okay, move to adopt. Second, Councillor Hanson. Any debate? Anyone wishing to vote opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, on to our first presentation of the day, the Regional Transit and Transportation Master Plan Draft Objectives. Jamie Graves and the folks from Leading Mobility are going to step us through this, and then we'll dive into a discussion on that. Jamie, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Clark, and morning to the board. Transportation investments are some of the largest investments made in the region, and so it's extremely important that the region are able to influence and coordinate effectively. And the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan will provide a line of sight for how member municipalities coordinate and collaborate on their vision for regional transportation system. The ECDEV section of the growth plan also identifies a key opportunity for the region to support ECDEV is with strong regional transportation planning. We are currently in a scoping step in order to ensure common understanding and expectations of what the RTTMP will achieve and also to receive direction from the board. The working group that we are working with currently consists of member municipality experts in transportation and transit, as well as Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors, and we're grateful for their expertise, which has strengthened this work before you today. In this part of the process, we are identifying the what of the project in the objectives, and the next step will be the how, which is the scope of work to advance those objectives. Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors has been engaged on the project, participating in the working group, and as some of you are aware who may have been at the Land Use and Servicing Committee's workshop, due to the writ period before the election, Alberta Transportation was not able to attend. However, we have had the opportunity to hear from them recently, and they're generally supportive of the pillars as they are written, and TEC will continue to work with us in the next phase of scoping. The Land Use and Servicing Committee on June 8th recommended that the board approve the draft objectives. And during that meeting, the discussion involved a concern from a member with the number of objectives and suggested perhaps that the number of the objectives should be reduced. So CMRB administration worked with the subject matter experts following the LUSC meeting to provide additional information in the covering report to demonstrate the rationale for why the existing objectives are being recommended and potential options for how the objectives could be reduced if that is the will of the board. And that's on along with the key questions on page 14 of the agenda. Should the board approve the draft objectives, the subject matter experts will work with the Transportation and Transit Technical Advisory Group to create a scope of work, or the how, which will advance the RTTMP objectives. The subject matter experts will report back to the Land Use and Servicing Committee and to the board in Q3 of this year with the scope of work, estimated budget, and an approximate timeline. This represents deliverable 3 from the project charter. From there, CMRB admin would put out a request for proposals onto Alberta Purchasing Connection to retain a qualified consultant to complete the project. Anticipated kickoff around being in 2024. Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass the floor to David Cooper, leading mobility of our transit subject matter expert, who's supported by Mr. Aziz Morali of Transcan Engineering, our transportation subject matter expert. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Apparently there's a button on that podium that will raise it up if you want to.
That is good to know. Thank
Higher. There you go.
Clark.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try to go full screen on here, or you can click the sides as I go through, correct? Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here with the CMRB board. My name is David Cooper, Principal Leading Mobility Consulting. For those who don't know me, I've worked in the transit sector for the last 18 years on regional planning, investment planning, here within Calgary, actually, in my past, as well as in Toronto and Vancouver. And I think a lot of that experience has influenced my work and doing a lot of work across the country, especially with agencies and federal funding, both on the operating and capital side. So some of that lens has definitely gone into this work as well. I'm going to walk through the objectives that we worked through TAG and the LUSC for discussion and approval today. Next slide. So the recommendation, as discussed by Jamie, is that CMRB administration seeks recommendation from the board to approve the draft objectives of the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan and direct CMRB administration to work with the subject matter experts in TAG to develop a commensurate scope of work for the RTTMP. Next slide. So this is the process we undertook for this work through the first 6 months of this year. So we undertook a jurisdictional scan of other Canadian regions, and we did that primarily because from the looking at comparable regions, how they do their regional plans and how funding plans also come forward on that, and looked at really the insights, objectives, and targets of those plans and time horizons to help inform the future scope of the RTTMP. We engaged member municipalities as well as Alberta Transportation Economic Corridors back in March to discuss their current policy frameworks, objective setting, and their data. We developed an initial set of objectives and presented them to TAG. We had 3 touch points with TAG and really deeply appreciate the support we've received from municipal staff and their time and effort on that effort. We had a workshop back on May 11th, and many of you were there with LASC members and municipal staff to discuss really the meat of the objectives, the foundational objectives and the opportunities, and also discuss prioritization of them. We went to LASC back on June 8th with recommendation to the board to seek your approval on the objectives. If we receive your approval, we will be looking to developing the scope of work and report back to you in Q3. Next slide. So in terms of looking at the guiding principles and really the foundational base of how we developed this work, is we had really a lens on advancing the vision of the growth plan, integrating both regional and municipal needs in our transportation network and looking at very holistically, taking a multimodal approach for future investments. There's a whole suite of different funding programs that do that, and other ways to also create economic mobility and opportunity for your residents. Looking to define a seamless approach when prioritizing regionally significant projects and programs when you seek future funding, and defining a collaborative and sustainable vision in the transportation master plan. Next slide. So there's 4 foundational objectives that we built out with TAG and LASC, and I'll walk through them thematically through the next set of slides, but the first one is looking at developing a regionally significant multimodal transportation network. The second pillar is pursuing efficiency in the planning and delivery of the regional transportation network. The third is ensuring that the transportation network supports regional competitiveness. And the fourth, building a sustainable and affordable transportation network. I'm going to walk through, next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through the objective statement and what we heard. There's a series of opportunities that are also listed there of how this could help build and shape the RTTMP. The first objective is developing a multimodal transportation network that connects preferred growth areas as identified in the growth plan and nodes along regional corridors to support the vision of the growth plan. What we heard from our municipalities is many municipalities strongly believe this was the most important objective, as that there were many opportunities to help really tie the transportation network to the growth plan. The original opportunities we found were too transit focused and should better reflect all modes, and we made changes to reflect that to have more of a multimodal approach in the conversation, and that municipalities are looking to optimize the existing network before building new infrastructure and the associated capital and operating costs that come with it. Next slide. The second objective is creating a board-approved list of regionally significant multimodal transportation priority projects. We found that many municipalities were aligned and recognized this objective's importance in acquiring funding from our senior levels of government, creating an opportunity specifically focused on prioritizing regionally significant infrastructure and defining what that means, as well as the final opportunity was originally an objective, but we found a way to fold it in terms of defining the role of the CMRB in the planning and development of intra and inter-regional projects. We have a number of different projects that really transcend across our region into other regions, and seeing how these could be looked into at maybe a policy framework component in 1B. Next slide. The second pillar is pursuing efficiency in the planning and delivery of the regional transportation network, with the first objective is reducing the infrastructure and climate costs for CMRB members and partners over time by optimizing the transportation network. So looking at ways that we can maximize our existing infrastructure before moving forward on more costly capital-intensive infrastructure. In terms of what we heard from municipalities, we removed maintenance from this objective, is that it's a responsibility of individual municipalities, not the region. The second is reflecting societal costs, especially climate change, for not pursuing a regionally significant multimodal transportation network. So this looks at, when you look at the different plans and programs, what is the associated really climate costs and what's the associated costs of not proceeding forward on a particular plan or project. And then looking to aspire and have a sustainable and affordable transportation network such as transit and cycling be used for trips beyond commuting. Next slide. 2B is, objective 2B is developing collaborative approaches for CMRB municipalities to facilitate a multimodal regional transportation network and services in the future. This is the conversation that really talks about service governance and talks about potentially future service delivery. The previous version of the objectives had facilitating a borderless approach through a governance structure, and some municipalities did feel this would be too soon for that conversation, but we've also heard from some LESC members that it is something that we do need to have a little bit of an eye on as well. The second opportunity should reflect the varying levels of transit service in place in some growth areas, in addition to established new service, really looking at new service standards or new service approaches when it comes to growth areas, and looking at how you can equalize those service delivery components and future capital programs in preferred growth areas. The third objective or objective pillar is ensuring the transportation network supports regional competitiveness. The first objective is provide an efficient multimodal regional transportation network that allows for the efficient movement of goods along with reliable access to jobs, healthcare, education, recreation, and tourism hubs. So this speaks to the importance of creating that regional network, but also the vital importance of economic mobility. We have employment trips that need to feed into all these different sectors across the region, and really having the eyes of really ensuring that we have a network that supports economic regional employment mobility. This particular objective scored very well from the municipalities in the prioritization exercise in the May workshop. There's a need to highlight the importance of also including healthcare and post-secondary institutions when we discuss about building a regional economy, and include the movement of people along corridors in the subjective opportunities to be more finite when it comes to the conversation of employment mobility. The second objective is prioritize and respect agricultural corridors, support the regional agricultural economy. We've removed the conversation of maintenance from this objective, as it's also very specific to the municipalities. And then we also did add and bolster the opportunities to discuss focus on how we move agricultural equipment and goods across significant transportation corridors and infrastructure. A lot of our community is very reliant on the rural agricultural sector, and I think it's very timely with this objective, with the previous presentation we had from Rocky View County, to really walk through the needs we have in this particular area, and we feel as SMEs that is an important area to look into as part of this exercise. 3C, enhance multimodal connections from preferred growth areas to employment hubs such as the Calgary International Airport, intermodal logistics facilities, industrial manufacturing hubs, post-secondary and healthcare institutions, and large retail sites. Same conversation, and just including that we include multi-sectors in this approach, and speaking to really reflecting concerns of flexibility for those transportation connections to these emerging growth areas, and incorporating the movement of workers to these employment hubs. Next slide. And the last foundational pillar is building a sustainable and affordable transportation network. The first objective is providing a multimodal transportation system that produces fewer GHGs emissions to reduce the environmental impact of transportation. One objective opportunity I do want to flag is undertaking a study of current emission levels in the regional transportation network to establish a baseline of GHG emissions, and really looking at the targets, but also reflecting that we will have changing economic patterns, and there could be opportunities to also reduce vehicle kilometers traveled with the changing economic conditions, could be factored into this conversation here in this objective. Municipalities did see this as more of an outcome, but agreed it could be a focus area. We did incorporate a former objective that was a standalone about climate vulnerability. We've definitely seen that. 10 years ago this week, we had the flood. I worked the flood myself for the city of Calgary, so totally cognizant of those conversations, but that is something that we can fold into this particular conversation on this objective. And it's also the conversation of reducing greenhouse gas emissions is also a key priority of your federal funding partners. The last objective is developing a regional transportation system supporting affordable and accessible mobility options and promoting an inclusive, equity-based movement of people. There was a strong desire to create affordable corridors consisting of affordable housing and mobility options, the need for better tools to maintain housing affordability, especially in new TOD developments. And it didn't score as high on the prioritization exercise, but in work and discussions I've had with senior level staff from Infrastructure Canada when it comes to the Permanent Transit Fund, and also looking at other funding programs from the federal government who are taking more of an informed investor lens, they do want to see movement and action at a regional scale on several components, including housing. That is something that's been very signaled quite clearly to municipal partners that I've been working with, and also in the development of future funding programs that will be announced this fall. So we feel that it was important to keep this into that conversation, as that would line to the conversation of future funding opportunities for your projects here in the region. My last slide is really just the next steps. If we, dependent on the conversation today, if there is approval of these objectives, we would be coming back with the development of a scope of work, working with TAG and the LASC, and report back in Q3 for the technical scope of work for consultants who develop your first integrated regional transportation plan. And with that, I'll take questions.
All right. David, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to you and to the team, to TAG and LUSC and everyone who's provided some input into this to get us to this point. We're getting close to rubber hits the road time, an appropriate analogy for transit and transportation, I think. So with that, if there are any questions or comments anyone wishes to make, please press your button and I'll do my very best to wrangle the system. So, all right, Mayor Gondak, go ahead.
Thank you. I have some questions that were flagged by our administration team, and I'd just like your feedback on it too, please, if I may. There is conversation about page 14 of the agenda package, talking about subject matter expert additions in column 1 and table 1. It talks about the words existing and being added to preferred growth areas. And our thought would be that we don't do that because the growth areas are quite specific, and adding this kind of language really kind of opens something up.
Through the chair, thank you, Mayor Gondak, for the question there. So the table 1 is proposed revisions. We could, the board could approve the original objectives or look to approve the proposed revisions if you're looking to streamline the objectives a bit more. In terms of they are preferred growth areas, it could also acknowledge existing growth that you are seeing throughout the region, and some of those may be servicing components that align to the growth plan. I may actually turn it over to Jamie here to maybe elaborate further on that one.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So part of the adding existing and preferred includes the idea of using what we previously had from the North and the South studies and incorporating what we now know to be the focus of the growth plan, which is focusing growth to those areas. And so the previous work acknowledged the existence of plans in place, and so does the growth plan. So this still is in alignment with the growth plan. So that's sort of to just be very clear that we are acknowledging that there is existing plans in place and that the growth plan focuses growth to specific areas in joint planning areas, in urban municipalities, and in hamlet growth areas.
Okay, thank you for that. I have another question. It has to do with addition or removal of some of the objectives. So there is a recommendation that we remove something that I think is important to keep in, and that's optimizing the transportation network to preserve efficient movements in people and goods along economic corridors. Can we keep that in?
We can keep that in. There was opportunity to merge it with, as an opportunity in Objective 3, not to lose sight of that. If you do feel that you'd like to have more of an explicit objective of that, I don't see a particular issue or concern. I think at the end of the day, the objectives in this in part 2 or the 2A and 2B are really components that bolster the other objectives. So they're not being looked to be removed per se, but more to streamline. But if you feel it's best to keep that as an explicit objective, I think that gets you very similar, if not the same outcomes. And I think from a technical perspective would be good either way.
Chair, I will just put this to my colleagues. I think it's important to be as explicit as we can with that language. In the conversations that I've had with federal officials, they like seeing those words. So if we are going to be pursuing partnership opportunities, I think we need to say it as much as we can. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hanson from Rocky View, go ahead. Or not. I'm sure we can do this. Control Shift Alt F7. No, there we go.
Sweet revenge. we're not the only ones that have trouble with the button. I'm speaking on behalf of Mayor Brown. He had to leave, but he did pass me some crib notes, and I think Airdrie is also aligned with that. They wanted to see basically words to the effect of reliable, climate and cost efficient in 3A, but if we're starting to make 3A so big and fat, maybe it deserves to stand alone. So I think Airdrie's aligned with that thinking. And speaking for Rocky View, I don't think we had a strong opinion one way or the other from administration. I know they worked quite a bit, and there was comments that we do want to make sure that north and south transit plans are incorporated in ongoing work. That's our main concern because we put a lot of effort into that, and it was smaller sub-regional, and I think it worked really well, and there's no reason to flow that into the final plans that are being developed.
Thank you. Mayor Jung, go ahead.
Look at that.
Got it.
My light works. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the report this morning, I almost said this afternoon. And Mayor Gondek, thank you for highlighting those two areas. From my perspective, I was looking at it from purely when the rubber hits the road, that we were focusing our efforts on one thing versus many things. And I think Jamie brought this forward in her presentation, that from the Land Use and Servicing Committee, we were really looking at it through that lens. But if we were to leave it in, I appreciate your comments, and I think they're good ones, and I would support them. And I think that as I read next steps, and maybe this is a question, so as we start to implement, we would have the opportunity to decide or determine as a board where we put our energies, and we could just put it into the one opportunity that we feel is the best, but still have the language for funding partners. So maybe we are achieving the best of both worlds.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mayor Chenang. We are, yes, that is effectively what would happen in the scoping process. We would work to develop a scope with these objectives in mind, and we are still mindful that, we need to keep the scope reasonable, we need to be strategic in what we do first and the following steps, but these are objectives that still can live in the document, and we will action them according to the priority and what makes sense, but also checking back with the board to say, based on what we heard, we have developed this particular scope and we estimate this particular cost, and if there are heartburn at that time, then we can revisit and have a look at how we might reduce the scope to whatever it is that creates the heartburn.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, so I'm supportive of the actions of Mayor Gondek this morning. I think they align, and I think we'll have that conversation at a later date.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't have anyone else on the list. Is there anyone else wish to make any comments or ask any questions? If there are none, what I might recommend in terms of the motion that we have in the agenda, that the board approve the draft objectives of the Regional Transportation Transit Master Plan, I might suggest we add the words "as revised" or words to that effect to capture what Mayor Gondek has talked about. So that would then make the motion that the board approve the objectives of the Regional Transportation Transit Master Plan as revised, and direct CMRB administration to work with subject matter experts and TAG to develop a corresponding scope of work for the Regional Transportation Transit Master Plan. How do we feel about that motion? Anyone wish to make that motion? Mayor Snodgrass, thank you very much. Mayor Gondek wants to second. Okay. Any further discussion on that? All right. By exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion? One opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So we've made some good progress here this morning, and we're only about 45 minutes in. How long do we feel the next agenda item may take? Do we want to take a break now, or do we want to get through the next one? Okay. Why don't we do that? We'll invite Steve Kwasny from MNP. I believe Steve is going to be we have a couple of presenters then from MNP to talk about regional economic development. And I think before we turn to them, I will hand it over to Jordan for a couple of brief introductory remarks. Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Clark. Members of the board, I just want to make really clear on what is being asked of the board today. You will see in the report that MNP has produced for us there is, excuse me, a purpose statement, 3 objectives, and then some commitments that are folded in under each of those objectives. What's really important to note is that today we're asking for approval of the purpose statement and the 3 objectives, and just kind of in general direction, if there's anything, to steal Jamie's word, that gives you heartburn in the objectives, to raise that to us. Because the intent would be to go away, work with the economic development officers and SMEs in each of your municipalities to come back with a level of effort and order of magnitude cost for the commitments that are there, so the board can have a more informed discussion on that. We just, before we did that work, we wanted to make sure that we were aligned with what the board would like to see in terms of future efforts. So I just wanted to make those comments before I ask Len and Steve to take us away.
Okay, thanks. Len, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everyone. My name's Len Nanjad, partner with M&P, and we're really excited and proud to have the honor to work with you all to develop and define what we're coining as a collaborative regional economic development framework and vision. And so with that, I first wanted to start just really quickly with a reminder of the purpose of the project at hand. And, you know, we were asked to form an economic development framework and vision, and through our discussions that morphed a little bit. But the primary purpose still holds, is that to develop a framework and a vision for CMRB members to collaborate and to guide economic development activities for the region, with a view to alignment with the CMRB mandate as it exists, as well as the growth plan and the service plan that have been developed and continue to evolve, as well as to enhance capacity to address economic development opportunities. And so just wanted to put that as the guiding framework and the purpose of what we were asked to do and what we present to you today here. With that, the approach that we took involved really 3 tranches of understanding. The first was research and just understanding what's happening in other jurisdictions and in other theories of economic development for regions, as well as in practice and what's happening. Then we also took a lot of opportunity to engage and listen to stakeholders throughout the region in various different interests and involvement in economic development activity. And finally, some working sessions, which included many, in fact, all of you here today in certain ways, in facilitating those conversations, as well as working with the working groups in administrations to help us more deeply understand what would work, what not would work, what could be aligned to, what could be committed to, you know, and where the nature of collaboration and focus would best meet. So with that, I first want to thank everyone who participated in this process as well, especially, you know, you all, the CMRB, the board, the members of the board administration as well that helped us and guided us through this process, the working groups who we sought feedback from and from all your respective administrations, and the many stakeholders and participants who we listened to on that. So I want to say thank you for that, and that helps us to set the frame that we built this together. And this is not simply a narrow expert view, but in fact a collaborative view that we bring to you. And we hope that you'll agree with us that this brings together a fairly clear and compelling statement of purpose and objectives, which will do exactly as the purpose of the project was intended, to guide and shape and be able to take advantage of the economic opportunities that we see in front of us for the region. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Steve to really discuss the economic development framework and vision.
Great. Thanks, Len. And well, we'll leave the podium as is, so it doesn't, we don't wreck the hydraulics if we have to go back and forth. So I want to echo Len's comments on the thank you for all of your participation. And the next couple of slides is essentially how we try to take the range of discussion and the breadth and depth of discussion that we had into establishing this common purpose. And you heard Len used 4 key words a number of times. You saw within the report, 4 key words were used a number of times. I'll repeat them again. It was align, commit, collaborate, and focus was what we heard. And coming out of the last workshop with the board and administration, I'll double underline the word focus was what we had heard. So, essentially what we tried to do is take the universe of possibilities that could exist within collaborative regional economic development and refine that into a series of focused next steps that you can look at to advance the discussion that would leverage the strength and momentum that you have to date and provide a platform to build off of. So that's where you'll see in this purpose. I'll highlight a couple of words that are in there. The invest and grow businesses was identified specifically both in the research but also in the discussions that we had with yourselves as an area of momentum. And I'll contrast that to in the schools of thought around economic development. It could be as broad as including things like innovation and business retention and things like that. Whereas from the work that we've done to date, invest and grow businesses seem to be where there was the greatest areas of alignment. And lastly, the term I'll draw your attention to is the regionally significant sectors, a term that is not unfamiliar to you as a group. We wanted to, again, align that to terminology that CMRB uses and that you folks use. And in this case, the intention is really about understanding that instead of trying to be all things to all people, picking, we've put forward the concept of picking 2, 1, 2, or 3 sectors to align on and build off of provides an opportunity to, like I said, build momentum, generate some quick wins, and show some real progress, which this group shared a real bias to action, I would say. So from an objectives perspective, so in the framework of the common purpose, then the shared objectives, essentially objective 1, to put it in a very fine point, is really about focusing and aligning as the members of CMRB on where you want to focus and how you define success in those focus areas. Objective 2, again, to put a really fine point on it, is about how you're going to collaborate to create the conditions for that success or set the table for that success in those regionally significant sectors that you identify or endorsed. And then objective 3 is really about building alignment across what's a very busy, very complex ecosystem and leveraging the CMRB's role as a convener and a facilitator. So when we use the term collaborate through this, I'll highlight that word was sort of floated to the top intentionally because the feeling was it was about facilitation and convening and collaborating rather than being directive and some sort of direction to the members. So I'll then just speak to quickly where to from here and then open it up to questions. So as Jordan said at the outset, the ask for today is to consider accepting the purpose and objectives as outlined, with the understanding that the recommended commitments and the related actions are really meant to illustrate how to achieve those objectives, but further discussion is required. So when we met with the working group prior to this meeting, I would say the feedback there was positive, with the caveat that if this board got a little too excited and wanted to do everything right away, that there would be some big resource conversations about how would you actually accomplish that. So there is some prioritization, impact, resourcing kind of conversations that need to happen. But there was a positivity around the direction from the working group that we received, both in the spoken and written feedback that we got. So that would follow the pending the outcome of today. And then lastly, there's a fourth phase of the project that is scoped in that is, again, dependent on the outcome of today in terms of how we communicate back to stakeholders and draft some key messaging on the direction the board wants to go and the opportunities from here. So again, I'll thank the members of the board, your administrations, the economic development subject matter experts, the other subject matter experts that you provided, the CMRB folks and the stakeholders. And I will shout out the couple of other MMP folks that we brought, Morella and Mari, who did a ton of work on pulling this all together. And so I wanted to thank them as well. So, but maybe with that, we can open up for questions, and we tried to run that through as quickly as we could to leave time for questions.
Well done. Thank you. Appreciate the brevity and the clarity. So thank you. Okay, we'll open it up for questions or comments. All right. Mayor Gondek, you're up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I noticed that you have put a particular focus on film and television, agricultural and manufacturing. Where's the role of being a transportation hub? Was that just not something that was prioritized by the group?
Yeah, so I think to speak to that, the sectors that were highlighted were ones where both through the workshops and then through the sort of pre-existing documents around municipal development plans and the like, there was the greatest level of alignment on. I think there's opportunity for discussion as to whether or not that is something that the board would want to pursue. Film and television, I would say, was the one where, in terms of being able to get to quick wins, build a momentum, and there was a lot of really positive sentiment around that. And agriculture was one that, when we just looked at everybody's documents and said where have they all said is a priority, floated right to the top. But that's not to say that there aren't other things that could be priorities. I think the real kind of underpinning of that first objective is not trying to do all things right away, but pick a couple and do them really well at the start. So.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I would just, I would say that we need to be really aware of the fact that our region is an inland port. We're the strongest inland port in Canada. And once again, when you talk to funding partners, they like that language. They like the language of trade corridors. They like to know that we have the ability to do, multi-modes. For them, it is something that they would want to invest in. So I realize that this is just feedback that came out of the sessions, but I think it's going to be really important to our region to play that up, especially with the opportunity that's available through CPKC right now, and the federal push for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If that play works, combined with their announcement today that they're looking at hydrogen-based locomotives, that's something that the entire region is going to benefit from. And it's going to give us better access to shipping agricultural product as well as all of the other things we do well here. So it was a little flag that I'd like to offer. My other question has to do with the working groups that are recommended. My thought is we all have a lot of stuff to do. Is there a way to leverage Calgary Economic Development instead, who is already doing this work on behalf of the region? And this is my question that came out when we initially started talking about this, when we wanted to determine whether we would create a new economic development organization or whether we would use an existing one. I would say for this type of legwork, we should absolutely be using them instead of creating working groups. That's just my thought. And I know that building trust takes time, but I would hope that at this table, we've gotten far enough to understand that CED has actively been promoting businesses in all of our jurisdictions. So if we can leverage their resources and their capacity to do the work that we would otherwise end up doing as working groups, I'd really like to pursue that. But thank you for this. I really appreciated the opportunity to engage with you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could we put the slides up with the three objectives, just again, so we've got the context of specifically what the words are, regionally significant opportunities. And do we have on the slides anywhere what those opportunities are, or is that just in our agenda package?
That would be in the agenda package, where the next step as part of the commitment would be to agree as a board what those are. So we didn't set out as part of the scope of this to say specifically it ought to be these. We suggested some as Mayor Gondek highlighted, but in terms of the scope of the project and the framework is really about driving this body to get to a conversation of let's pick two or 3 and go from there.
So we're at the point where that's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for, and that we can look to incorporate that sort of thing. That's great to know. Okay. And then the question on leveraging working groups, I'll put that to or leveraging CED potentially, I'll put that to the group. We have a couple of folks on the speaking list. We'll go to Councillor Hanson from Rocky View. I think. I'm sure we are. That's exactly what's going to happen next. There you go.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad we heard that from Mayor Gondak, because Rocky View had a little bit of heartburn, and I do have to apologize. We missed the 4th working group meeting. We had some personnel change and managed to fumble the ball there. But if truly we're looking at these 3 high-level objectives, then I don't think we have any heartburn at all. We had some specific heartburn about how a couple ideas seemed to get emphasis, and it was hard to read that out of the agenda compared to the verbal presentation. So I think at a high level, absolutely no problem with these, but exactly same comment. Film, I know there's a lot of political excitement. It impacts everybody. It's multi-location. It's easy to prove that it's going to benefit most folks in the region. Likewise with agri-food, but I think there's other areas that we need to look at and actually truly come up with a priority, and is it really our biggest bang for the buck? But I kind of agree with MNP that we need some quick wins and show some successes. So there might not be quite as big of a buck there, but we're going to get a good bang because of the good news and the success story. So I think that's warranted with some further discussions, even at the working group level, as to how we actually succeed really well on this particular ED project. There's a lot of buy-in from everybody, and we want to make sure that it turns out well.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fote from Chestermere, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I totally am in support of Mayor Gondak's suggestion. I believe she has about 100 and some people in economic development in her group, and I think they would be a great resource to tap into. Like I know Chestermere, we only have one person right now, and I think there are some things that we need to let the experts, the people that are that can do it, let's get them involved in this. I am very, very supportive of the agri-food thing, because we at Chestermere have a group that want to come out there already, and they're just waiting to move forward. And so I support Mayor Gondak and move forward on that.
Mayor Janung, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the report this morning. Really like the work here. And I really appreciate the high levelness of the objectives, because we were, as a working group, starting to dive into some of these details, and we realized quickly there's hundreds of opportunities in this region. And if we were to spread ourselves across all of them, we would likely not do any of them very well, and maybe just make inches instead of miles, and where we're supposed to be trying to work together. So really the conversation, and I don't disagree that the transportation hub is something that we could focus on. And just basically just to repeat what Steve has said and what Councillor Hanson has said, is that the film industry really was one that that rose to the surface, that we talked about, that perhaps there's traction there and we can work together and really create that environment and how we work together on one subject that really isn't controversial to, I'm guessing, to most of us in the region. And we could really activate this environment and just prove it, so that when we get into the harder topics, we already have something that we've kind of proven our success at. So that was kind of the thinking there. But I think the objectives don't allow us to, or push us into these areas just yet. So we're just approving them at a very high level, like I say. So as far as activating the Calgary Economic Development Initiative, I see value in that in some regard. I mean, how we do that, I think that's another conversation. Maybe we have some regional board members that participate, and I don't want to get into the details of that, but certainly interested in how that might work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Robinson, go ahead. I'm sure we can do this. There we go. Go ahead.
Good. Thanks for the presentation. I guess I understand the content of the motion, but I guess I'm not quite clear based on the discussion whether or not we're defining in the motion, sort of in the background, the regionally significant opportunities as film and agriculture, so that by passing the motion, we're saying those are the two things we're going to do, or whether or not that's like actually a thing that's going to happen somewhere between approving the purpose statement and getting to objective one, if that makes sense. Like it's not like when I read this thing, it says grow business in our regionally significant sectors. That's all I see. If I'm a member of the public, if I'm a member of the government, I haven't read this entire agenda report and everything. It doesn't tell me that that means film and television, agriculture and agricultural manufacturing. So I guess my question is are we supposed to consider the motion with regionally significant opportunities as a defined term to mean film and television and agriculture? Or are we supposed to interpret it as we're going to go do some more work to actually define what those regionally significant opportunities are?
I see some head nodding from Jordan on this. Jordan, you want to weigh in?
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Yes, it's the latter, not the former. The intent here is to get some direction from the board in terms of agree with the vision and then the objectives, as that is what we had asked MNP to do. As they noted, through the course of the project, it kind of morphed a little bit. And we also asked them to give us, so what are your best thoughts on next steps? We will go away, come back with a prioritization exercise, and with the feedback today on, we want to see some transpo, we're thrilled to get that type of feedback and come back and say, okay, in order to do a transportation hub, it's going to have this level of effort with this, ballpark level of cost or whatever that is. I'm not a economic development expert, but go away and have those conversations. With the suggestion from Mayor Gondek and the offer of CED's expertise, from an administration standpoint, we would be thrilled with that, as there's only 5 of us, but it is up to the board on how they feel about that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll have to hit your button one more time. We'll get you back on there. All right, go ahead.
I guess then my suggestion is perhaps objective one needs to be a bit revised to define and focus on and pursue regionally significant opportunities, if we're not going to know what those are first before we can start to get to objective. We can't focus on them unless we know what they are. So I think we're going to need to I think that is part of objective one, is agree those are the ones we're going to focus on, but we need to actually define them. It's not stated in there, but I think that is part of the thing. And then I guess what I think be curious to hear an answer on is when we talk about what it is that we're going to focus on, what are the metrics we're going to use to define what the regionally significant opportunities are? And I get we've had sort of let's call it a holistic, subjective sort of assessment of what people feel are the good ones. But I think, in terms of what are the actual dollar numbers you can move? What are ones that go across the regional boundaries of the different member municipalities? What are the ones that actually require coordination between them? What are the right ones to do all those sorts of things? And maybe it is the two we've already talked about, but I think we do need at least some objective basis on which to say that we've looked. Here are the ones, maybe we screen out already that we know, here, film, agriculture, transportation, manufacturing. These are the ones that are a bit obvious, but here are ones where people do move across borders, and we do need to have coordination on transportation. We do need to have regulatory coordination, that type of thing. I would be very interested when we do that defining exercise, if there's some metrics about that rather than sort of just feelings about it.
Okay. So metrics we heard for sure, and then that first objective, instead of simply saying focus on, it would be add the words define and focus on and pursue, something like that. Define in there somewhere. Okay.
We'd be supportive of that.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. We've got Mayor Gondek up next, followed by Councillor Hanson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the latitude. I know I've already had a turn, but some of the conversation has sparked a thought for me. I think that work around defining and focusing is absolutely going to require some feedback from Calgary Economic Development, who probably have a really good understanding of all the files that they've got in play right now. So I'd like to make sure that we, in some way, capture that. And I think we've had this conversation before, so it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but I'm going to pose the question again to my colleagues. I probably need to go back to council to make sure that the informal way that Calgary Economic Development has been supporting all of us takes on some sort of a more formalized approach, whether it's just an acknowledgement or an acceptance that we serve the Calgary region. I think it's going to be important to build that kind of language into something. I don't know what that something is, and that's something that my council can deal with. But to have a nudge from this board for me to go and do that, I think is going to be incredibly important.
Okay, thanks for that. So let's go to Councillor Hanson, and then maybe we can circle back on what that nudge might look like. Does that sound fair? Okay. Good. We'll get rid of that. We'll do that. And I think we're there. Go ahead.
So through the chair, one other little tidbit, sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, is just, I think CMRB staff capacity has to fit into this as well, but it's dependent on, I think, that whole CED. I was kind of waiting to see if there was support for the CED idea, and I was going to bring up Groundhog Day. So did you at all reach out up till now, or is that sort of still on your to-do list? And did you get any early indication at all from them, or is it new work for you?
Go ahead.
Yes, I have spoken with them. I've spoken with council, but it's been very, what's the technical term? Loosey-goosey. Yeah, exactly. It's not 100% directional, but it is a common understanding that Calgary Economic Development has been working with the region for a very long time. The de Havilland deal is a really good example. The fact that all of us have benefited in some way from the work that they've been doing. And it's not always a direct location within Calgary proper. So I think we've been operating on good faith and sort of that understanding that they will always do that work, but I think it might be time to formalize it a little bit more. And I think maybe to address this idea of, giving me the nudge to go talk to my council and formalize this, we might want to build in some sort of a report back feature into the motion that we're doing, so that the momentum that has already started stays and we get regular updates on specific things we need to accomplish.
Thinking about what that motion might look like, thoughts on do we want to combine it with this, that we approve the purpose statement and objectives, and that we request that Mayor Gondek would talk to CED, something like that? Open to ideas.
I'm going to look at Jordan. I'd be happy to make a motion, but I believe we have passed a motion in the past to this effect. Correct? Or Groundhog Day is a little fuzzy right now.
I believe at the first strategy session, we requested that Mayor Gondek raise it, but I think to Mayor Gondek's point of, in terms of having a report back, and I think it was directional, not, or I would say testing the waters, not directional.
Okay.
If I recall the exact wording of that motion, that Mayor Gondek, I think it was explore whether CED would be willing to take on this work and have that conversation with her council. I think from what I'm hearing, we're looking for something that's a little bit more directional, and maybe something along the lines of request Mayor Gondek formally ask City of Calgary Council to include regional economic development in CED's mandate.
And report back to CMRB.
Yeah.
Can we do it by July 21st? Let's try. Don't ever get what you don't ask for, right?
So moved.
So let's try, that was, I don't know if Shelley caught that. It's amazing you can tell anxiety by body language. So something along the lines of that, so our current motion, and further that Mayor Gondek requests Calgary City Council to add regional economic development to mandate of Calgary Economic Development.
Formally request.
Formally request, something like that.
Yeah.
and report back to the board by July 21st, 2023.
You get that?
Okay. Jordan, go ahead.
No, unfortunately not. On that, Lisa, being the amazing human that she is, the motion that we passed was that the board requests that the Mayor of Calgary approach Calgary City Council to explore opportunities for Calgary economic development to work regionally with CMRB members. So my brain did not totally fail me. It is as I remembered.
Well done. Good. Okay, great. Up next is, everybody good, Mayor Jung? Thank you. Councillor Hanson and Mayor Gondek. Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Yep. Through the chair, just my memories of Groundhog Day, but I think there was almost a discussion that it might already be in their mandate. And if it is, does this motion still survive? Does it make sense, or does it need just a minor tweak? What happens in case? Do we want to strengthen it or something? That's what I'm thinking.
Good question. Mayor Gondek, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this motion works. I think it's, and I can take it back with the history and say, you know, we've come to you once before and said, let's explore this. We're coming to you now with a lot more meat because there's been work done on this. So I don't think it's extraneous at all. And if it already exists within their terms of reference, we just highlight it and we're good to go. I had something else very profound to say and then I totally forgot what it is.
We have time.
So yeah, I think we're good. I'm just going to put this out to administration that's tuning in. We need to get this on the July 4th agenda so that we can get back here for the 21st. I remembered what it is. I won't be able to come on the 21st. My alternate is also unable to attend. So if we have nobody here, can I just count on administration to bring this forward? I will get you all the information you need.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Anything further on this before we move to the motion? We'll go to Councillor Robinson. Go ahead.
Just a point of inquiry, is the motion to include the amendment to objective 1, is that included in it? Because it's straight off our package. Okay, fair, that works for me.
Clear to us. I don't know if you want to include the word as amended.
So what I would recommend then is that the motion read that the board approve the purpose statement and objectives as amended, contained in the, motion that board approve purpose statement and objectives contained in the CMRB's Collaborative Regional Economic Development Framework and Vision Report as amended. And that, then I'll have Shelley read the second part of the motion that we wrote down. Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, if we can put that up on the screen just so we can all see it, we're very clear on it. Okay, we'll just take a moment here to make sure we get it up on the screen. And then while we do that, Mayor Gondek, you've buzzed in again. Go ahead.
Just a question. Is it clear in the motion that we're making that next steps are enacted?
I believe so. Because if not knowing the motion exactly how it's worded, I believe that it says that and report back. So it would come back and say that yes, City of Calgary Council has agreed or whatever the response is. And then it will allow us to more formally engage with Calgary Economic Development on this file.
I guess my question is the next steps that are identified in MNP's report, the work to do. Are we confident that this motion does address that as well? That we are asking for an update that also involves actioning next steps and telling us how those are going?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we've got Councillor Fote, go ahead, followed by Mayor Brown.
A question I have and ask for clarification is this an MP report, and then what Mayor Gondek is going to see if we can get that to happen. Are these two groups going to work together, or how is this going to work?
So MNP, once the communications part, the phase 4 of the project is done, have fulfilled their mandate. To Mayor Gondek's point of, striking working committees or having CED take up the work in order to action the objectives is really the next steps, and that would be stewarded by us. If at some point in time we come to the conclusion that we need additional support of some type, then we would come back to the board and say, hey, we're going to need to go get a consultant to help us with objective X.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mayor Brown, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize everybody to step away for a meeting, so I missed most of the, if not all of the presentation. Just a couple of questions. So what does regionally significant mean? Did we already talk about that? And if we've repeated it, I apologize. And the other part, Councillor just said was, Mel, sorry, I'm not understanding. So we have all these, we saw the presentation from Mayor Kissel. They've got this amazing economic development going on that's regionally impactful because it creates employment, business opportunities, ownership, et cetera. So how will this work? I'm just trying to understand. If CED's taken the lead on this, we all have our own economic development departments to whatever capacity. Why would CED be working on this on behalf of the region without the region participating, is my question. And we have defined what regionally significant is. So what, if you could tell me that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an excellent question. Jordan, I think, has an answer to both of those.
So on the regionally significant, Mayor Brown, we wanted to maintain, I would say, consistency across all of the nomenclature that we use at the CMRB. And we had very lengthy discussions with administration and, if I recall correctly, the then Land Use Committee to determine that regionally significant means it impacts 2 or more member municipalities. So there is some type of intermunicipal collaboration for that. So in terms of transpo, obviously that impacts 2 or more. Agri-food, agri-food processing, 2 or more. So those types of things. So that's where we wanted to stay with that definition. In the conversation we had with the working group, that exact question was raised because they're saying, well, if I collaborate with my neighbor, is that regionally significant? Our concern is if we have multiple definitions, then it can become a little bit confusing. So that's the term for regionally significant. In terms of go forward with the working group, the intent is to have all, I would say, the coalition of the willing. So if economic development officers from Airdrie are, and you are wanting them to participate, then that would be how we would go forward on doing the next steps for the objectives. It's just really looking for someone that has the horsepower to start that off. Originally it was going to be us, but CED has a much greater degree of expertise and is able to say, here's all the work that we've done on sector X. That can be vetted by, other folks and bolstered by economic development professionals from other municipalities.
Does that answer your question, Peter?
Creates a lot more. So, because everything that Mayor Kissel had just presented, I would argue impacts more than the needed municipalities to define what regionally significant means. So what would be the advantage to the county to work with the neighbors to pursue this when they're already successfully getting it? And that could be said for the town of Cochrane or Foothills or Okotoks or whoever. I'm just trying to understand how the pieces are coming together and where this objective actually will benefit the participating municipalities here at this table. And maybe I'm too far ahead of the game. And I totally appreciate that Calgary is the place to go with their capacity and resources. But I'm just trying to see how we're all going to be pulled along because we all have different levels of capacity within our own organization. So how do the pieces fit together? And I apologize for chatting a little too long here, Mr. Chair.
I think
just a little confused. Thank you.
It's an excellent question. I guess my sort of meta comment is the overarching principle here is collaboration. And the idea is in that coalition of the willing idea. I think Steve has a point he wants to make and weigh in here.
Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of the questions that you've tabled are outlined within the recommended commitments and suggested actions that I'm not sure that it was part of the discussion to come back with, should the objectives be approved. And so I'll draw your attention to a couple specifically around I think it's within objective 3, where it says, using what the Edmonton Metro Region did as an example or as a template, but we use the term protocols in here to establish protocols or explore protocols about how the different municipal economic development officers or organizations will work together, collaborate, and establish some level of formality to that, which I think might speak to some of the questions that you raised in terms of who does what and how does everybody fit together. I think if there's broad support for the objectives, then as you dive in as a group into the prioritization of the actions and commitments, there's probably ample space to explore that. And especially around the notion of regionally significant, as Jordan said, we wrestled with that language a lot to see what's the right way to say it. And I guess our view to it is that call it the CMRB dictionary definition of regionally significant as it's used in the servicing plan and the growth plan and the like is the table stakes. But what we tried to establish as an intention was things that are that are significant and impactful amongst that. I like the term, the coalition of the willing, that has broader interest. But we didn't want to introduce a whole bunch of new terminology and then you guys have to have a whole other meeting trying to figure out what word M&P was using and whether or not that's the same thing as something else that you've already established. So our view was that's kind of the 2 would be the absolute minimum, obviously, but the goal would be, as you explore this further, that there would be a sort of greater number than that involved.
Does that answer your question?
Steve knows I'll have a bunch more questions for him, but not really, no. I'm trying to understand the mechanics and the value proposition for everyone, and I appreciate the regional significance. And I don't know how the capital region has been successful. I was there yesterday, and I talked to a few members of the board. They haven't seen a ton of regionally successful economic development ventures that have been adopted by the entire board, where they've come together, they've said, okay, we're going to provide this opportunity and we're all going to share in the value proposition and the costs associated with. There are no real examples of that. And I'm not trying to be a downer, but I'm just trying to understand, because we're pulling a lot of people along here that maybe don't have the same. We have 6 active resources in Airdrie. I don't know what Chestermere has. I don't know what High River has. I'm assuming it's a little bit less. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure if this board's going to be spending time, money, energy to focus on something that's never going to come to fruition, I think that needs to be established, and maybe that's through the objective process. That's all I'd like to put out there, but I appreciate your details, Stevie. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Hanson, followed by Mayor Janung and Councillor Fote, and then maybe we'll start to think about moving towards the motion.
Yeah, through the chair, one potential comment that might help Mayor Brown, but we are fully expecting, as we're redeveloping our municipal development plan, that plan is going to be informed by both our own county economic development strategy, but also what this framework is for the region, and where we choose to develop exactly what and what those development forms look like should be tied into what the region, or where the region thinks it's headed and what that might look like. And I can see that as a way to cast a net that everybody can use for their own purposes.
Mayor Janung, go ahead.
I was going to talk to Mayor Brown, but okay, well, he can hear me from there. This is a little bit of repetition from earlier, and I understand Mayor Brown had to step out, but I guess speaking to the mechanics, and that's why I think these objectives and the plan that we're voting on this morning really doesn't get into too much of the details yet, and we can cross that bridge when we get to it. So I'm in favor of the MNP report that's in front of us with the amendment to add that definition. But I think really from a mechanical standpoint, from my perspective, we will, and that's what my comments were earlier, if we identify something like the film industry, and maybe it's not that, but if we pick one thing, it's not in an effort to recreate all of the work that our own municipal governments are working on, our own ECDEV departments, if we have one, are working on. It's really to pick one thing that regionally we can work together on. Maybe it's through Calgary Economic Development, maybe it's through another entity, or maybe it's on our own. I don't think we know that yet, but it's really not to recreate the wheel or create more work for one another. It's to define something that as a region that we can all get behind and support and maybe attract. And if we attract one more movie, or and maybe it's filmed in multiple locations across the region, that would be a best case scenario. But then we can start to work off of that momentum, look and point to that success, and then get behind a different economic development initiative, and then start to build a library of initiatives that we're supporting regionally. So I think we really want to zoom out and past the objectives and then get into the details later. And I think the addition of Mayor Gondek's suggestion, or part of the motion now, to get Calgary Economic Development on board, I think let's get them on board, or see if they're on board first, and then start to work on the mechanics of how we work and interface with one another. And that's a conversation for another board meeting.
Thank you. Hey, Councillor Fout, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm all about collaboration. Don't get me wrong, but I think that I would have to agree with Mayor Brown that we all have our own economic things we're working on within our own municipalities. But I think we've got to look beyond that there's regionally, like these 3 pillars that we have here and things like that. I think there should be a 4th pillar in there. I really, really do. And my thought is we still have not. It's tied in with the agricultural side, and I hope it will be looked at. Is we have a water issue within several municipalities within this board, and I think we need to take a serious look at that. But that needs to be combined into that sort of thing. But I will agree with the Mayor of Cochrane. His suggestion, we need to make a motion to move forward, and then we get the other things tied into it. But I definitely want to see a water issue. It's very, Calgary has a problem, Rocky View has a problem, Chestermere has a problem, and Airdrie has a problem. And so I think there's something we need to throw into this mix.
Thank you. All right, Mayor Gondek, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't disagree on the water side. I think the beauty of this type of a strategy, merged with all of the other work that we are doing as a regional board, predicates any decisions that we make towards economic development to be rooted in access to water. So I think all of the heavy work that's been done around planning and servicing feeds right into our economic development strategy. So I have every confidence that we'll be able to get there. I still have a little bit of a concern. There's a report back date for me, but there's not a report back date on next steps.
Jordan, do we have a schedule in the charter that we're working to?
So given if the timeline for CED, right, I don't know that we're going to make by July 21st, but my intent would be in the fall.
Can we throw that in there
Sure.
somewhere? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
So we would, so the motion as it reads now, board approved purpose statement objectives contained vision report as amended. And where would you like to see the report back from MNP and CMRB admin back to the board? No later than.
If I may.
You are still on, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if we, after, as amended, we say and request, if we put a colon there, and then we made, number 1, that I do this, and number 2, that the CMRB or administration report back with an update on next steps, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Then there's 2 outcomes that we need.
Great. Like CMRB administration, report back on next steps, no later than, when's our September board meeting? Should we just say we don't have a September board meeting? October 13th. Perfect.
Thank you.
And we'll add years to those, 2023, July 21, 2023, just to be absolutely clear. Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Gondek. And we'll go to Mayor Brown. Go ahead. Oh, hang on. You got to. You're good. You're on.
Am I on?
You're on.
Testing.
Red means go.
So to Mayor Janung, I'm going to be supporting the motion. I agree with trying to get down this road. I would like to see whatever regionally significant means to two neighboring municipalities. What does that equate to? So does that mean if Rocky View and Calgary and Airdrie are sharing an area that's regionally significant, would that mean that we all would share in the opportunity? That's the part I'm not quite understanding. Like, is the hope then that this whole process will provide a greater economic development opportunity for everyone if one area is successful and then the other one's successful or not successful? That's the stuff I really would like to get clearer definition on. So I'm supporting it. I don't want it today. I don't expect it from administration, but somebody needs to explain, because when we first started this conversation, it was about if Cochrane and I decide that we're going to do something together, that it would be mutually beneficial financially, because we're all struggling for more money. Grant dollars are evaporating, a lot of downloading across the spectrums of government. That's where I thought this conversation was going. We were going to do a win-win capacity, but again, I'll point to Mayor Kissel's great presentation. There is win-win going on here. You can see the road development on the way up here. Like, there's lots of action happening in here. So what's the advantage to the county to say to everyone, oh, well, we're winning, so we're going to allow Calgary and Airdrie and everyone that's impacted by this, you're going to share in our win. And I just try to understand how that will work. So I've stopped talking. I told you, Mr. Chair, I'd stop talking. I'm ready for the motion. If it hasn't been seconded, I'm happy to do that and look forward to further conversations down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to Mayor Gondek, and then I think we should probably try to get to the motion.
Yep.
All right.
I won't take long, just to quell some of the concerns that Mayor Brown has. I think this means that there are benefits to partners. It won't always be all the partners. In fact, it will probably rarely be all of the partners directly impacted. But the fact that we're able to sell the region as a place that people should actively look to do business is the greater advantage to everyone. So there will be relationships between members that directly impact them only. But I think the reputational uplift that comes from something like that is the thing we need to consider. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Great, thank you. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay, let's get to our motion. We haven't actually officially moved that, I know, Mayor Janung, but I think we'll come to you to make that motion. That the board approve purpose statement and objectives contained in the CMRB's Collaborative Regional Economic Development Framework and Vision Report as amended, and request 1, that Mayor Gondek formally request Calgary City Council to add regional economic development to the mandate of CED and report back to the board by July 21st, 2023, and 2, that CMRB administration report back on next steps no later than October 13, 2023. Mayor Janung, do you wish to make that motion? I find that hard to believe, but yes, that's an eloquent motion indeed. Mayor Brown, second. Any further discussion on that motion? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion? 1 opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, let's take 5-ish minutes, see if we can come back at approximately 11:18 and carry on with our agenda. Thank you very much. Yes.
How long before we go into closed session, do you think?
I don't think this is going to take very long. I would say maybe 10 minutes or so for this, probably would be my best guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a meeting at 1 o'clock.
Do you? Okay, well, we're going to try to get out of here as quick as we can. Okay, we'll call this back to order. One of the nice things about being together is being together, and we get a chance to reconnect and chat. And one of the challenges with that comes a bit of a time crunch created on the meetings. So, but it's certainly a good thing in the aggregate. So, with that, we're back now in session. We have a presentation from Ann Harding of Forum Community Relations, updating us on our Indigenous relations initiatives and our Stories of the Land pilot project. So, without further ado, Ann, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah.
The one that has the speaker on it, I bet. Yep. Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me back. And so what I'm here to seek approval for today is for the project charter for a pilot project for what we've termed the Stories of the Land project. And so this is a concept that the board approved a year ago with the Indigenous Relations Framework. It has 4 parts to it: dialogue, learning, co-creation, and celebration. And so this fits under that celebration deliverable. And so as we termed that part of the framework, it was to celebrate the indigeneity of the region. And by that, we've explored this concept of recognizing that there are hundreds, potentially thousands of culturally and historically significant sites, historically significant for Indigenous peoples across the region, that those are stories that are not told. And as Mayor Gondek referenced in her land acknowledgement this morning, that have been suppressed or ignored. And so this is about elevating those voices and those sites across the region and really identifying and helping people connect with that sense of place and the significance and history of this place. So the deliverable that we had for the 2022-23 Indigenous Relations Work Plan was to come back to you with this charter for a pilot project. So it went from a concept to this pilot, and we had a working group with 4 participating municipalities, member municipalities, and we were out doing research saying, okay, what might this look like to have this pilot project? How would we identify sites? Is there even an interest from nations and Indigenous groups to be working with us on this? And so I want to share a little bit of what we learned over the last several months that we've been working. So we had some I'd say grander ideas at the beginning about what technically could be possible, perhaps augmented reality or virtual reality experiences that might immerse visitors to that Indigenous history. We learned very quickly that that was a very complex space and potentially very expensive, and that did not feel like we wanted to start there when we didn't quite know what that end product would be. So the proposal you have in front of you is more of a keep it simple approach to have recorded videos of Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders sharing their histories. That, of course, could be used and augmented by municipalities. If there is a host municipality to a site and you are wanting to use that baseline story to further your reconciliation efforts, that would be available. We would also, the pilot supports having QR codes physically at those sites. So these stories would be accessible from anywhere on CMRB's YouTube channel, along with a QR code as well, so folks could access those stories when they are physically at the site. So that's the recommendation from a technical perspective. From a cultural perspective, we have reached out to the different cultural groups. I'll also make a quick note that the approach here is not engagement or not sites specific to the individual First Nations, but rather to the cultural groups. So we are working with Sheldon First Rider, who is a cultural mediator and knowledge keeper through the Blackfoot Confederacy, working on Blackfoot sites rather than looking to identify sites that are different for Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. We are also working for Stoney Nakoda sites rather than identifying sites that may be specific to the different groups, because historically they weren't fractured through these through sort of these artificial imposed nations, but rather were broader cultural groups. So that's a distinction for this approach as well. We have had confirmed processes, I guess, identified for Blackfoot sites and for Métis sites. So the pilot proposal is that we go where the energy is, keep it simple, spend this fall working with Sheldon on identifying appropriate a Blackfoot site, a knowledge keeper to share that story, that we work with the individual referenced through the Métis Nation and identify those sites as well, while continuing to engage and identify appropriate knowledge keepers from Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina. We've heard there's some interest, we just don't have a confirmed process for that yet. So the pilot says, let's start with 2 or 3 sites this fall. That is what the budget is proposed for, while also applying for grants that would allow us to have more sites. So working to have another 2 or 3 sites done by Q2 next year, if that grant funding comes through. So I'll pause at this point, I think, for any questions.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate that. Any questions? I don't see any in the queue here, but while we wait, the only other piece I think that is in terms of the overall project chartering, I think Jordan wanted to just make sure we pointed out there's a financial change to the project charter, and maybe Jordan, you can just speak to that as part of it, because I know that was something that came up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the board's edification, the overall cost of the project is targeted at $44,000, depending whether we get 2 or 3 sites. We are able to repurpose $10,000 from Anne's current budget. I would say defraying that down to $34,000. And if the board approves this project charter, it would be approving $34,000 be used from the contingency budget, which is at $75,000. So $34,000 of that 75 would be used to fund this project.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and we had one person in the queue, but I think they've, oh, there we go. Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Yep, through the chair, is there any way to integrate potentially some of the, if it's YouTube, maybe some volunteerism added to the effort, but just from the media programs at either Seder or Mount Royal or something like that? Is there an angle where we could make the group bigger at small cost, but maybe provide additional experience, even if the help is of student level?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. We did actually have we went on a field trip to SAIT and took a look. They offered the use of their equipment, but the expertise would not be such that it would have actually saved money in the long run in terms of the editing and cultural protocols and hosting. I think that was actually the main piece that was sort of tripping us up is, do we want to use a virtual reality or augmented reality animation experience? If we don't know where that's going to be hosted, we would need to potentially create an app or partner with an organization that has an app already, and that just got very complex very quickly. And to the note of student labor, we investigated the opportunity of providing that experience and had talked to others who had gone that route for some of their projects. And again, it got very complex very quickly.
Okay, appreciate that. And is there any linkage with Travel Alberta and sort of tourism, and maybe it's people wanting an Indigenous experience? Is there any hooks into Travel Alberta? I know they're investing heavily in our region, and is there any further synergy?
The hope would be yes. So we haven't particularly explored that. I think we're working on a very staged approach for this. So what we're aiming for right now is to have a proof of concept, just a couple of sites to show, and I could very much see that growing and becoming more integrated with Indigenous Tourism Alberta, Travel Alberta, potentially integrated to broader initiatives in the region. At this point in time, we're aiming to start small, get something built, and then potentially grow from there.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions or comments on the project charter? We'll go to Mayor Brown. Go ahead.
Just comment, it's awesome. I can't wait to see where we progress. Learned a lot over the last number of years on the Indigenous front, and as Mayor Gondag so eloquently said, and that was an amazing land acknowledgement. I've never heard one like that one before. We have a lot of work to do, and these are awesome next steps, so thank you for bringing this forward, Ann.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll, oh, there's one more. Go ahead.
I was just going to move that Mayor Gondek do all of our land acknowledgements.
I'm afraid that's not going to work. Everybody else has to step up. I think we all set a very,
Yeah.
you set a very, very high bar. I agree completely.
Way to raise the bar. So I'm fully in support of the project. I just have a question. So we have a couple of, I'm sure we all do, but in Cochrane, there's a couple of culturally significant sites that I've met with elders on my own, and I've been stumbling on how to embark on this journey. So I'm happy to hear that this is something that we're doing as a region. But just to maybe fully understand, part of the stumbling that I've encountered is if we start to highlight these sites, then they become recognized, and they're actually at risk. So is part of this that you're layering in like a protection, some kind of, I heard QR codes. So we want to open this up, as Councillor Hansen has suggested. I think there's a whole economic and tourism initiative behind this, but also protecting the culture that exists and from harm from people just wanting to access it. Does that make up part of the initiative?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. So what we're seeking approval on here is, so page 88, I'll direct you to your package, is the criteria for the sites that we select. And so by approving the charter, you're approving that criteria and giving the working group the opportunity to apply that. We are targeting sites that are already publicly accessible, and that actually narrows it down a fair bit. So in terms of an access point, it might bring more people to your parks, but also looking at those that are already accessible. The other note I'll make is the cost takes into account the intellectual property of the Indigenous knowledge that we would be seeking, and of course going through the appropriate protocols to make sure that that knowledge is validated and recognized, and that the elders are appropriately compensated for sharing that, and that they are only sharing what is appropriate to be shared publicly for public consumption. Again, that narrows things down a fair bit.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I was going to suggest that maybe this pilot, I have a pilot project of where this could be located, but maybe we can take that offline and have further discussions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mayor Janun. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay, if none, then I will ask for a motion that the board approve the project charter for the Stories of the Land pilot project. Mayor Brown, Councillor Robinson, thank you very much. Any discussion on that? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed? Seeing, hearing none, that carries. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one opposed, thank you. And I think that covers that, so thank you. Anne, and I want to recognize Andrea is here as well with the forum. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your work on this. It means a lot. So thank you very much to both of you and to the whole team that's been involved. Okay, so we're now at the stage of the agenda where we are going to move into a closed session. This means that Sean Iwasek from the Government of Alberta will drop off. And Jordan, I think we'll ask you to stay for this. And I will ask for a motion then, please, that we move into a closed session pursuant to Section 21 of FOIP. Mayor, Councillor Hansen, Mayor Janung, or we'll go Councillor Fote for the second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of moving into a closed session? All right, that is approved. Thank you very much. We'll move into a closed members here who need to get moving. We're back into public session. Are we rolling, streaming, thumbs up? We're happy. Thank you, Michelle. I wonder if anyone may wish to make a motion that the board approve the direction to administration as discussed in the closed session. Mayor Brown, followed by second by Councillor Hanson. Any discussion? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that? One opposed, thank you. And that motion carries. Thank you very much. We have a motion around the next agenda item. Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, so based on our discussions, I'd like to recommend that this be tabled to our meeting in September, I think.
Perhaps we just table it to a future meeting.
Sine die.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second for that? Thank you, Councillor Fote. Thank you. Any discussion? And all in favor of the motion to table? That motion carries. Thank you very much. On to our roundtable. I'm going to switch the order up on us a little bit because we've got a couple of folks who need to leave. I'm going to ask just Mayor Janung very briefly. We've been approached by the organizers of the folks who are looking to potentially bring the Commonwealth Games to the region. They've requested that they present to the board. We just wanted to provide a little bit of context of what they discuss, what may discuss and what the ask may be. And I know Mayor Janung has had a good conversation with them. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us about a 2.5 minute précis of what they may discuss.
2.5 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's more of an update and information sharing request. I think if anything, the request of our board would be a letter of support at most. It's not, and really an endorsement of the idea of a bid. It's, I mean, Mayor Gondek's probably got as much information as I do, but they're looking at a bid for Edmonton, Calgary, Enoch, and Sutina. So it would be with a whole lot of regional opportunities involved, and also, from my perspective, economic development kind of play for our entire province. So I would look forward to hearing from them. I think putting it on the agenda today was just to see if there was any sensitivity with other municipalities around the table. If somebody sees this as a conflict or wants more time with it, then we could pull it. But I think it's something we should listen to.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Thank you, Greg. So we just wanted to just put that out there for anyone. Just we'll give them maybe 20, max 30 minutes on the agenda in October in July. To just provide us with that presentation. 20 minutes max. Okay. Any objection to that? So we'll add that to the agenda. And then Jordan and team have done a lot of hard work on our office lease. And Jordan, turned over to you for a quick update.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank Shelley and JP for doing all the legwork on this. We are going to be moving offices, and I will give more detail at the end, but we are, over the lifetime of the lease, be saving about 15% compared to our current space, and it is a better deal than we were able to get from other offers. It is I would say it has a more functional board space for us to be able to use for small meetings. And the office space is well suited to the organization. So I will send out an update. We'll be moving at the end of August and be in the new space for September.
Great. Thank you. And that'll be obviously reflected in the budget going forward as well. So yeah, kudos. I know Shelley in particular and JP did a lot of work on that. So thank you to both of you for your diligence on that. Look forward to the new space. And then finally, you should have all received, but wanted to make sure that we made note of EMRB's 15-year anniversary celebration coming up on the afternoon of 7th of September in Edmonton. I'm planning to attend, so we'll send some representation from our side, and I think you're all invited to attend as well. We just wanted to make sure that you've formally received that invitation from our friends at EMRB. And that covers off the items we had on the round table. Does anyone have anything else they wish to discuss in the round table? Mayor Brown, go ahead.
Mayor Gondeg's left, but on July the 8th, at our cenotaph, we've received a Korean War monument from Kapyong, Korea. It was gifted it's been a long process, but we're the 6th municipality in Canada, the first in Alberta to receive such a monument. It's about 6.5 to 8 tons. It's a sculptured rock from the Battle of Kepyong. They actually have taken it from where the battle occurred. It's an incredible piece, and we've got 32 delegates coming in from Korea. So I want to thank Mayor Gondag because she's going to be white-hatting everyone, which I greatly appreciate. We're entertaining them for a number of days, but just wanted to extend an invitation to my colleagues to come and attend. It's going to be an amazing first act of remembrance for those that sacrificed themselves for these battles. But the Korean people are so unbelievably appreciative of Canada and the service of our veterans. And it's going to be a remarkable few days. So just wanted to make sure the event starts at 11. There'll be some refreshments and lunch afterwards. We have a lot of dignitaries coming from across the province and actually across Canada. And of course, from Korea. So just exciting, and really wanted to extend an invitation to all of you to come down and be part of that. I won't call it a celebration, but it is in a strange way. It is an amazing gift, and it is an amazing way to remember. And we're just very fortunate to have been the recipients of such a gift, and we're looking to honor that. So it is on. I'll send out a formal invite through my office just so everybody has it. Obviously, it's open to the public. We have a small area for seating, but it's a fairly large space. It's where our TNC is. You were there just recently, Jeff. But yeah, just thought I would share that and wish everybody a great Stampede and very good summer with your families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll go to Councillor Fote and Chestermere, and then we'll Councillor Hanson and Councillor Robinson.
To the chair, I have a request that I would like the information that is sent to myself to be of larger caption so that I can actually read it. I do find it difficult to try to follow at times.
Absolutely, yes. We'll make sure Jordan's made a note of that, and Shelley will make sure we send you that specifically. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, just a bit of good news. We have a business in Bragg Creek, a boutique hotel that's about to be constructed, but it was a recipient of a quite sizable Travel Alberta grant. So they want to invest in the region. I don't know if there's been other projects approved, but Rocky View secured some provincial money to make sure this project's successful, and we'll be able to sell exportable hotel rooms to very experiential, travel-oriented clients, hopefully from outside North America. Anyway.
That's great. Good. Okay. Councillor Robinson, Okotoks, go ahead.
Great, thanks so much. I just wanted to note, well, I'm particularly looking at the next meeting date for this board. The Alberta Summer Games are being held in Okotoks from July 20th to July 23rd. I think in terms of the games, I just want to note that it is actually quite a regional undertaking. The number of volunteers we have from outside of Okotoks, the Calgary region, Foothills, all those types of places. We had tons and tons of people coming through to volunteer. So thanks so much to all the volunteers. If anyone is still interested in volunteering, there's probably still some spots on accommodations and facilities to help. But otherwise, for everyone attending that meeting, make sure you give yourself some extra time because there will be traffic disruptions. There's triathlon events and other things happening. So there will be road incidents happening in the community on those mornings. So give yourself some extra time.
Noted. Thank you very much. We'll make sure we make a note of that. And so with that, that is our next meeting, is Friday the 21st of July at 9:30 in the morning in the beautiful town of Okotoks. That's our next board meeting. Land use and servicing will be Thursday, July 6th, 9:30 a.m. online, and the governance committee Friday the 15th of September, 9 a.m. and go to meeting online. Before we depart, just a huge thank you to Michelle and Ben and the entire team here at Rocky View County for your hosting and your technical expertise and assistance taking us through this. So it's been a very smooth meeting, and thank you very much for that, for all of your help. And with that, the agenda being exhausted, I declare the meeting terminated. Thank you all.